Welcome back. It's a good night for a story. We'll keep you company. Thanks for listening and or watching. Now, tonight's tale. A bounty hunter's trade is dangerous as all get out. But there's one payday none should ever take. For the moment you do, hunter becomes hunted. Bounty Hunter's Horse. A red mare ambled up the rustic lane, glowing brightly under knives of autumn sunset. Its rider had dashing locks to match, dangling coils of fire falling out of a wide-brimmed Stetson. Emerging from the leafless fingers and dead boughs of 100-year-old elmwood, both man and mount were lean and gaunt, the emaciated eyes and withered ribs of one soul shared between two bodies. Reeb McClearly buried his rusty shovelhead into a dusty field, cupping hands at a sweaty brow to study this approaching figure. "Looking for work?" he called out with all the friendship his parched palate could muster. "You come from Bonehat?" The rider halted a few feet off with a long, labored groan. "Chickensaw Trail." "I see," replied Reeb. "Been riding quite a spell then. If'n you're looking to catch on here, we're looking to gain some hands. Boss don't want no cowpunchers, though. All plowing and tilling in these parts." "Fine with me and all. What do you grow?" "Taters, mainly." The stranger nodded. "Think the boss man will allow her to water and graze?" Reeb tilted his head, considering. "Sure. A lot of fellas have their own mules or colts. I'll take you around to meet everyone tomorrow. But for tonight I was just about to bed out under this tree." An hour or so later, Reeb gathered kindling into a campfire and potatoes into a bubbling cast-iron pot. "Appreciate your kindness to me, Mr. Reeb. Don't even know me," said the stranger, pulling a raincoat over rickety shoulders as if it were a granny's knitted quilt. "No trouble at all. We're a friendlier sort out this way." "You born and raised in Bonehat?" "Surely not. Just hoping to earn enough to make it over to Birch Trees. With any luck, I'll find some gal to marry me. Hey, is it too personal to ask for your name? Otherwise, I won't know what to say when introducing you on the morrow." "Just go by the stranger." Reeb raised his eyebrows, ladling out a steaming spoonful of stew. "Well, here you go, stranger. Can I at least get what brought you out this far?" He made no better headway with this question, and, with a shrug, resorted to cooling his food with his breath. Next morning, the man awoke to the noises of the stranger shoveling ashes onto the last of the dying embers. "Your morsels did me good last night, Mr. Reeb. Can't thank you enough. Yes, sir, tastiest victuals and fixins I've enjoyed in over a week." Reeb McClearly removed a worn bandana from around his neck, emptying a canteen upside down over the stubs of a reclining, receding hairline. The morning was bright, so much so that the man thought he might have overslept till noon. He finished washing and wiping his nape and neck. "Time is it anyway, stranger?" "Sun broke an hour ago." Light of day revealed that this freckly-faced, ginger-headed stranger couldn't be any older than 25. Previous evening he would have passed for at least twice that age. "Want to apologize for running cold on you last night. Gonna trust you now. There's a bounty on me for offending the honor of some rich rancher's daughter. Nothing serious, swear. It's all a private grievance." Upon hearing this, Reeb immediately got to his feet and set about herding his cookware into a rucksack. Where was all this trouble? Fort South Collins. Shoot, take a small fortune hiring men to run you down all the way from Fort South Collins. The youth didn't elaborate, dropping down onto a log to unload sand and stones from his boots. Reeb took this chance to reach dirty fingernails deep into his sack. Like the head of a rattler from a gopher hole, the barrel of a carbine snuck out. The stranger instantly dropped everything, eyes wide and white. He had a peacemaker in a saddlebag, but only socks in his hands. Figured it was you. Just needed to be soberly sure first, said Reeb McClearly. You ain't on the run for insulting no lady. Bounty on you is for chillin' that manhunter, Hammerin' Hank Hanahan of Hillcock, which you collected. Trusted you, Mr. Reeb. Ain't fair marching me all the way back to Fort South Collins over something that's none of your business. And for what, really? A few coins? More than a few. We both know that. Reeb stood tall with his rifle. And there won't be any marching, son. Pull on your footwear. The stranger did as he was told. Never bring myself to kill anyone that was barefoot. Before the youngster could breathe his next breath, 3 gut shots introduced his spinal cord to the outdoors. Falling backwards over the log, death found him before the ground. A coyote singing in the deep distance alerted circling carrion birds overhead. The shooter highly doubted a 4th lead slug was required, but came over leastways to double-check. Nope. Youngster's pale body was frozen into an awkward sitting posture, 3 rings of smoke wafting from an exposed ribcage and belly. By high noon a week later, Reeb McClearly trotted into Bonehat atop a red mare. This backwater township had grown considerably past few seasons, complete with a new sheriff's deputy marshal. A pack of ratty boys scurried off the minute they caught sight of a 6-foot-tall lump under a raincoat on the back of the man's mount. Reeb tied off on a hitching post, dusted himself with an ill-fitting Stetson, and ambled into a saloon. Inside, 4 men huddled together playing 5-card stud. Reeb gestured for a bottle of Mexican snake whiskey from the squat, square-jawed man behind the bar. Nothing finer than morning whiskey, gentlemen. Let me join and I might be persuaded to share. Please, said a southerner with a Dixie fedora pulled low over a catfish mustache. Thibodeau Flats, Louisiana. And you, cowboy? He asked in a watery drawl while pointing at an empty chair. Reeb McClearly, he introduced himself, accepting 5 shot glasses from the bartender, plus an amber bottle with a floating reptile inside. Never seen Louisiana. You in, senor? Asked the dealer with a slim cigar between his lips and a fat sombrero over his eyebrows. He tossed cards at the newest player from a freshly shuffled deck. Reeb reached out but found himself blocked by a baroquely carved cane. Forgive me, friend. Takes more than liquor to buy into this hand, said Thibodeau Flats. The man ponied up the cash and glanced at his cards. No one at the table folded any hands, and the pot ballooned to $75. Call, exclaimed the southerner. Reeb re-scanned his cards. Before I show out, I want to pour y'all another drink of this poison. Think of it as my apology for all the unpleasantness that's about to befall our game. He refilled everyone's glass, then turned over 2-3 off-suit. Thibodeau Flats rejoiced over his pair of aces just as the sheriff's deputy marshal threw open the front doors, an armed posse of no less than 12 men at his back.
There he is! That's him! Shoot him! Kill him!
Screamed the street boys, causing the 4 other card players to bolt from the table. Don't know where you're from, mister. But in our town, only one that's allowed to hitch a rotten corpse to their horse is the undertaker's buggy, declared the deputy marshal. Reeb produced a signed document from an inside vest pocket. That dead man is a wanted man, more than now than when alive. Didn't want to bother you about it till you'd had your fill of breakfast. Kinda underdressed for a bounty hunter, aren't you? Asked the deputy marshal. Not for long. The lawman holstered an ivory-handled six-shooter revolver, turning back over shoulder suspenders to address his men. I'm crossing the room to read that. If and I don't make it, don't leave enough skin on this man's bones to fill his boots. He came over and read for a very tense minute. This a joke? Can't gun down no man for this. No. Was gunned down for fleeing the charge, not for the charge itself. This is justice? Asked the deputy marshal. Satisfaction is the backbone of Fort South Collins law, sir, without which we might as well all resort to savagery. Within the hour, the sheriff's deputy marshal had telegraphed Fort South Collins, and Reeb McClearly got paid in full. Stepping from the doors of the county jail, the man lit a cigarette he'd rolled a month back. Before he could strike a match head, though, he was greeted by the entire community. Heretofore, he'd been entertaining thoughts of a hot bath for his feet and an even hotter ribeye for his supper. But all the marms and menfolk waiting in the street spoiled his appetite. Mounting his ride, he saw a squaw spying on him from a darkened alleyway. At first he thought she might be a statue, only she stepped from the shadows. She was too pretty and young to be on her own. Then he noticed the black ribbon slipped between her waist and lapels. She wasn't parturient, she was sick. Consumption, probably. That night was cold in the high mountain passes, wind whipping over the jaws of so many sharp, rocky teeth. But Reeb refused to light a fire. He wanted to be able to get the drop on anyone from Bonehat looking for an easy payday. His bet was on that southerner from Louisiana, or his Spanish dealer. He forced the stranger's red horse to lay down, curling up next to her for warmth. This beast never got spooked for anything, even after smoking her former owner right in front of her. Amazing equine, to be sure. Most docile, tame thing you ever did see. By midnight, the skyline was cloudless, and yet somehow inexplicably starless, and moonless, too. Must be the whiskey, thought Reeb. Then he saw it, a campfire down in the canyons below. Here they come, he now told himself. Quiet as nature would allow, the man loaded the horse and set off into the night. But a hasty getaway was impossible in all this blinding wind and biting cold. His boot wedged just as all footing along a path gave way, and he slipped over the side of a ravine. Reeb McClearly was struggling to recall his own name. He tried shielding his eyes from some blinding light with his fingers, but his hands were useless. They'd been bound behind his back with a thick cattle rope. He could feel a warm trail of blood creeping down his nose to find his mouth. The man was also fairly sure his right ankle was twisted and sprained. Let me go and I'll tell you where I keep my money stashed. No one answered him. Had he been left for dead? Must be daytime because his eyes were having real trouble adjusting. Strange he wasn't sweating at all, though. The Spaniard with the sombrero stood up. He wasn't dealing cards, but a torchlight, mashing it into his victim's eye socket. Reeb yelled so loud varmints' relatives as far as the Pecos knew about it. Now all light was gone. Everything in the world for him went pitch black with pain. Thibodeau Flats chuckled. Yes, sir. Do tell, 'cause the next torch goes in the other eye. "Where are all my cash and my souls?" Reeb panted. He could hear the two men talking it over and felt assured it was just them whispering. Where were the other card players from the saloon? Didn't matter now. He heard footfall coming at him again. As soon as Reeb felt someone grab his foot, he banged his heel straight down. This ignited a funnel cloud of tightly packed gunpowder from the tip of his right steel-toed boot. The topmost portion of the southerner's scalp hung in the air for a beat, as if for a moment wanting to fly back to Louisiana. Reeb felt a body collapse and heard the sound of a high-pitched squeal from his partner. "Well, hombre, think you can probably piece together what's left of your buddy and drag his carcass off this mountain. Or you can slink over here and find out what's inside my left boot." The man with the torchlight needed less than a second before pitter-pattering off into the night with his sombrero between his legs. Reeb comforted himself that his suffering was nearly done. By morning, coyotes and buzzards would be feasting on his liver. He made peace with this predicament, nodding in and out of consciousness from a numbing cocktail of fatigue and blood loss. Then he heard the sweetest voice of an angel speaking. He roused, figuring he was about to be escorted before the judgment seat. "Hey, mister, want to ask you something. How many years you been in this business?" "You're that young squaw I saw back in Bonehat. Can hear the Chickasaw in your voice. Right? It is you, isn't it?" Over the course of the next minute, Reeb heard her stalking silent as a panther in the deepest, darkest rainforest. Soon he could distinctly feel the warmth of her breaths not an inch from his face. She'd eaten wild huckleberries with honey recently. He was either about to be kissed or have his throat slit. "Really don't want to catch tuberculosis, ma'am." "What's that you say?" she asked. "Your consumption, ma'am. So if you don't mind maybe backing up 10 feet or more." "Will you marry me properly if I was to help turn you loose?" she wanted to know. "Makes you think I ain't got a wife already." "Name's Carmelina." "Pish. What'd your mam and pap name you?" She pondered for a spell. He couldn't tell if she'd forgotten or just didn't want to say. "Tippa." "What's that mean?" "Cut off," she said. Reeb laughed. Don't our parents always know? A week later, snow came, a precocious winter prematurely encroaching a lazy fall. Reeb's vision had mostly returned, although his ankles hobbled as he walked. Even so, he let Tippa have the red mare most hours. Planned to give her the horse outright, then hand the reins off to her kinsfolk. He'd run across her tribe several times before, even trading pelts on occasion. This squaw was actually quite funny. Apparently she'd seen a lot of touring vaudeville back in Bonehat and memorized every joke and routine verbatim. Sharp as a tack, pretty as a peach, had everything going for her except contagion. Life's never fair, is it? Birch Trees was just over the range. A more cosmopolitan joint couldn't be found for another 50 miles. But this storm front was going to be slow business. The man was betting winter was still too young to have any sting yet. Know your people, young lady. Probably know your daddy. What's his name? Chief who or what? He dead. Sorry? He dead. It's Chickasaw for adultery, she quipped with a smile over bemused lips. He shook his head. As I was saying, know some of your old men. Bet you they'd introduce me to some of their sons. Really? That's great, Reeb. Make sure you mention that I'll be dead in 5 years. You're the one that's hot to get hitched, he reminded her. Anxious enough to propose to me, after all. Yeah, well, figured you'd be dead before me, inherit all your wealth and titles. A shot sounded from what must have been an easy mile off. Schofield rifle, buck hunter. Only this game hunter wasn't gunning for a rack of antlers. The round found a new home in Reeb's spleen, misting crimson across the snowy boulder opposite him. The man cried out louder than the time his eyeball got scorched. He dropped and propped, desperate to get a gander at who just killed him. Couldn't tell. Nothing but snow caps far as the eye could see. Must be that Spanish dealer again. Must have hooked up with those other two card players. He looked down, bleeding out fast. In all the excitement, Tippa had taken cover below the red mare's hooves. "Hey girl, can you reach my carbine? Toss it over to me." She slid the weapon through the snowdrifts, near enough his boots. Only Reeb didn't have the strength to lift, let alone aim. He spent the next 30 seconds wadding shirt tails into his body's newest hole. "Need a doctor, Tippa. You gotta go find out who that is down there. Try and negotiate with them if you can." "Right now?" she whimpered. "Take my carbine." "No one ever taught me to shoot." "Figure it out. On your way." She did as she was told, nabbing the man's gun and raincoat. Tippa had handled firearms in the past. She'd held a meat cleaver before too, yet that didn't mean she knew how to butcher. The girl ducked down after 150, 200 yards, uncertain where she was going, let alone what she was doing. She thought hard, then decided to shout. "Who are you? What do you want?" No one answered at first. A minute later, she heard another man speaking to her, well off from her position.
"Easy, ma'am. We're not here to hurt you. Name's Charles. This is my brother, Lev, and our youngest cousin, John Sandbear."
"Sandbear," she repeated to herself. "Are you Cherokee?" Tippa asked loudly.
"Yes, ma'am."
"Good, 'cause I'm the one what shot Sitting Bull."
"Sitting Bull was Lakota, ma'am. We're with Fort South Collins. Got a decree made out for the life of Reeb McClearly."
"You're gonna need to get him a doctor."
"Not gonna happen, ma'am. Now you need to vacate so you don't get killed, too."
The girl ascended back up the pathway, her descending footprints already vanished under fresh powder. "Reeb, they're bounty men, like you. Didn't know y'all hunted each other." Reeb McClearly was already an ice block, snowflakes flitting around one open eyelid. The red mare looked up for the first time, nostrils flaring at her newest master. Tippa wasted no time retrieving a money belt from the saddle. The man had been utilizing a hollow pommel to hide it. She thumbed through the cash. Must have taken banks a week to print this amount. More than she'd ever seen in her life. More than she even knew existed in the whole world. Tippa mounted, then paused. She was rich. Still, why should she leave Reeb here for those Cherokee boys to claim? In this weather, he'd make it a good long way before thawing. There'd be no blood trail. John Sandbear's twin cousins felt sure that girl must have taken Reeb McClearly to birch trees. He was either checked into a room, a doctor, or a cemetery. By Wednesday, Charles had introduced himself to every boarder and tenant. By Thursday, Lev had interviewed all the docs and their assisting nurses. And by Friday, there wasn't a grave digger's hand they hadn't shaken. This left the law as their best last hope. A scrawny Scotsman wearing a tin star on his houndstooth beret explained that he'd paid a sickly young squaw the reward for Reeb's cadaver. "Dead?" Charles grimaced. "Very," guaranteed the Scottish sheriff in a tree-bark brogue. "'Twas legal, all right. Verified it over the wire, so any bonuses were rightly hers as far as I was concerned." He opened his desk and found a stamped certificate inside a drawer of ink blotters and cigars. "This docket is dated last Monday," said Charles. "Oh, you can read," noticed the sheriff. "Why isn't he in the ground already?" Lev wanted to know. "Was a fear he might have had her disease, and an autopsy to open his lungs would have been costly. So I told her to clear out and burned him with the corn cobs and crop slash." Sheriff could see the disappointment building over the three youths' faces, sullen and hangdog. "Smart lass, your squaw. To be sure, she didn't want anyone knowing her vulnerable state. Alone and flushed with cash is all I mean to imply. Flipped me a golden double eagle before she walked out that front door right there." Charles motioned at Lev, and his brother removed a silver bowie knife from his belt loop and handed it over with its sheath. "Heading up the mighty Mississippi." "That's a big river," said Charles. "Oh, aye," replied the Scotsman, "but only one railway goes to all the ports." 3 days later, and the Cherokees were hopping off the last boxcar and caboose of Red Rail steam engine number 131. Port Town was the closest dock to birch trees, and trading that bowie knife quickly proved profitable. A hotel porter recalled an Indian girl with a ravishing fire-red mare loading onto a riverboat. "It was the Lady Belle Grande," he said enthusiastically. "She'll make Port Lava Rouge on the 16th. Charles turned to his brother. "Get us some tickets. Make it a fast steamer." "Hang on, Charlie," Lev complained. "We're down to our last $50. We can't keep on keeping on this way." "We'll stow away." "She beat us to the payout. Let's find something else." Charles grit his teeth bitterly. Did she track him through all that marsh tar? Did she battle 4 days of rain and dysentery? Did she suffer 1,000 stingers from that myrtle tree with a hornet's nest? No, all she did was cash in on daggum handiwork. Not having it, not standing for it. Lev and John had learned not to bother with Charles once he dug in stubbornly this way. He was prone to start throwing his fists about, especially if he laid hands on a bottle of fire sauce. They reached Port Lava Rouge a day behind the Lady Belle Grande. Didn't take much doing to learn where visitors stabled their horses. Only she wasn't there. Charles threatened a shoe shiner in the regular method he did his cousin, and got a lead about a Catholic widow that fed and aided runaways, especially street girls. Old lady's late husband was a homesteader on the outskirts of the prairie lands. Built an impressive Victorian estate out there, complete with running picket fence line. Men servants, one big galoot in particular, helped keep any undesirables away. They'd need to be clandestine as they were clever and keep 1,000 yards shy, at least. By sundown, they were watching the place through a spyglass Charles had liberated off a laureated colonel's scoped musket. It was here that the boys finally got their first glimpse at the girl that had hollered at them on the slopes overlooking Bonehat. She was passing to and fro from a watering well of brick and mortar, fetching wooden pails for her red mare. When done, she next set about brushing out its coat and tail. Charles stared without blinking once. "Found our Chickasaw," he informed his brother and cousin. "We'll wait her out. Sure as strays always head south, she'll want to ride out to her res before the land gets any colder." 2 weeks and 1 hailstorm later, and Tippa and her red mare were still staying put. Storm had sent a pinecone-sized hailstone at the back of Lev's skull that knocked out 2 front teeth and was still slurring his speech a day after the fact. Now, what modern parlance will come to term the sunk cost fallacy was fast possessing Charles' soul. This was no longer about the money they stood to recoup, but punishing this squaw for all the pain and loss her meddling had caused. He instructed his cousin to keep watch in case she departed while he went off to get his brother patched up. That night, spent under icicles of moonlight, was the first John Sandbear had known apart from any family. He was alone. And so, as one does in such situations, he looked up and sought God. Did the Almighty have anything in store for him in this life or the next? Did it all really come down to getting what you can while you can, the way Charlie said? Nothing audible came, yet somehow he felt his prayer had been heard. At the crack of dawn, the boy used the spyglass to witness the girl hugging an old woman in a black dress and pilgrim's lace on the porch. A big man helped the Chickasaw into the saddle, and she rode easterly. Plan now was to hot-foot it to the top of a short bluff and open up with a Schofield rifle. Before long, she came gently galloping out from a dry riverbed gorge, and in a heartbeat she was in the crosshairs. Wind was tame, yet it was still a long shot at best. Didn't help that she was awfully petite. Pretty, too. Then the red mare abruptly stood in its tracks, the rider dismounting and unbuckling the saddle. This was more than a stroke of luck. If he didn't hesitate, John could get the reward and a horse without resorting to murder. The squaw was on her hands and knees sobbing, even though she knew someone was walking up behind her. "Don't know which direction to ride," Tippa confessed. "Doesn't that all depend on where you're trying to get to?" asked John Sandbear. "Don't know that either. Be careful, might not want to be too close. You and your brother must have already heard about my being sick." "They're my cousins. I'm the only boys my parents got." He shouldered the weapon, lowering himself at eye level. Lifting her chin, he parted the straightest raven locks he'd ever beheld. The face underneath was so tender that he couldn't resist caressing down her cheeks with his trigger finger. He doused a bandana and wiped speckles of blood from the corner of her mouth. "Want you to know something. Even with the consumption, you're prettier than all my sisters." The girl smiled and laughed. "Not their fault they're Cherokee." She opened the hollow pommel and showed him what was hiding inside. "Could probably buy my reservation." Her hands pushed it into his chest. Even for a teenager, he was already strongly built as her father. "And you?" he asked, peering down at the loot. "What are you getting out of this?" She dipped her head without a word, then looked up again keenly. "Listen to me, please. Marry me, or shoot me through the head and bury me out here before you leave." "Marry you? I'm not as old as I look," he said. She began crying again. "Neither am I." The boy kissed the girl flush, some of her blood staining his lips. "First time you ever been kissed by a man before?" "John Sandbear," she said, pulling his dark fingers under her chin. "Never even been held before." 4 of the most peaceful slices of summer since the Garden of Eden came and went. Well, mostly. There was one miscarriage. Otherwise, Mr. and Mrs. John Sandbear and their daughter, Noli, had a superb spread west of the prairie lands, including a goodly number of longhorn. Should mention that after Lev died, Charles did come snooping around. His cousin ran a bullwhip so hard up his backside, the closest they ever got to one another again was 2 continents. By the 5th summer, the husband was doing both indoor and outdoor chores around the farm, all the while caring for a toddler and a bedridden wife in her final days. On their last night together, John came right to Tippa's bedside. Next morning, he was digging her grave outside their bedroom windowsill, holding their small daughter in his arms as they said goodbye. There was a neighing from the corral. It was the red mare, of course. Hadn't aged a day, never lost a hair in all these years. That night, he tried to keep Noli's active little mind preoccupied, letting her play with the peas and potatoes he'd chopped up onto her plate. Following morning, John needed to ready a steer for delivery, while his daughter was off singing within earshot. He pondered what the future held for them. It was too big a task, managing this place with her mother gone. A shot rang out, and Noli was crying a second later. There was blood on her dress sleeve. Her father huddled underneath a watering trough. He was being lured and baited. "Stay right there now. Don't you move till I say so." He hushed and shushed his tiny girl.
Come on out, John Sandbear. Name's Cotton Boll Weevil. I'm deputized.
Echoed a voice from the soaring butte somewhere behind the outhouse. "Deputized? You just shot my 3-year-old.
Winged her is all, 'cause her dad's got to answer for the slaying of Carmelina Raincloud.
Impossible, John reasoned within himself. Tippa Raincloud, my wife. She died from tuberculosis.
Come on out and I'll show you my paperwork is good. Your babe can get stitched up on her way over to Fort South Collins. That's where you'll settle this account.
Look, mister, I was a bountyman for Fort South Collins. Tracked down Reed McClearly, who himself worked for them. Spot a pattern here? Only reply was the faint noises of tin spurs on the move, sliding over gravel. Noli was undersized. Could be this shootist believed she was still too young to walk, but she was already a gazelle just like her mother. Her father wordlessly summoned her to sprint into his arms. She made it, only not before Cotton Boll Weevil capped off another round, clipping her in the side of the head before ricocheting into a flat stack of 2x4s. John brushed blood and tears from his daughter's squinting eyes. This was a marksman for sure. He'd twice grazed her just enough to hurt, and from at least 500 yards both times. The red mare was kicking and bucking out in the paddock, but how would the father ever make it to her? All this violence had made the Longhorn equally upset. They'd stampede given the opportunity. Thankfully, their pens were directly in front of him. He kicked at the pegs of the stalls until a 6-foot-long crossbeam of gating fell lame. With a powerful whistle, every last head of steer charged into the open fields. Thundering walls of hooves and horns swelled around both sides of the watering trough, two bodies clutching one another for dear life underneath. When dust clouds were at their thickest, the man and his daughter disappeared into the wilderness, unlike Lot's wife, never once looking back. John Sandbear spent the next several months subsisting on odd jobs as well as rations and comforts whenever they encountered his tribesmen and their wives. He never did know that sharpshooter's fate. As it turned out, he'd survived the goring, though paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of his days. But if it wasn't Cotton Boll Weevil, then somebody else would be along. No matter where they went, whether real or imagined, felt like they were being tracked every inch, every step. Get a steep crick in the neck looking backwards more often than forwards. By the next summer, the man and his daughter arrived at Fort South Collins. The father wasn't sure what he was expecting the antebellum South to be after the war. Whatever it was in other states, Reconstruction had never settled here. Burned-out pitches of cannon scoring filled in with potholes of squalor. A cottage market for Union trappings and reb trimmings for the having alongside every brook and dell. Noli stared into her pa's eyes for reassurance as he carried her down an empty avenue of giant palmetto trees. She pondered what he might be thinking, then rested her head back down onto his shoulder. In due course, they finally made it to the front steps of what was once called a courthouse, dilapidated paint melting into the cores of blasted-out window panes. Made no sense. How was this the issuing office for anything, let alone paying out contract killings? John leaned in for an improved view of this failing scenery, but to no advantage. Doorknobs dissolved into their locks upon first touch, and he made his way inside using very deliberate footsteps. Choirs of mosquitoes and fireflies harmonized by a swamp out back, not daring to enter. Took a full minute to correct for the lack of any useful lighting. Indeed, the only true revelations came when lightning flashed from an eastward midsummer squall. Whenever this occurred, rows of benches momentarily came to life, pews in a judicial cathedral. Looked as if no one alive had set foot in here since Appomattox. The man felt both welcome and unwelcome, one in both at the same time. "Hello?" John risked. A judge's gavel fell to the ground, rolling around until finally coming to rest at his feet. Metallic horseshoes were heard emanating from what must have been 100-foot-long hallway of marble. The red mare made its entrance, appearing between split gateways. One went up, the other down. The first, cloudage and skylines. The second, cinders and coals. Inside hell was Lev, Reeb, and countless other damned bounty hunters. The man understood that one day soon Charlie would join here, as well as Cotton Boll Weevil. He looked behind, but there was no street anymore. Noli saw her mother and a brother she never knew. Making her way over to the horse, Tippa embraced her daughter in loving arms. They both turned and smiled at John lovingly, longingly. Now he felt himself being pulled towards the red mare, though his own legs weren't walking. The two stood before one another, meeting in each other's eyes. His soul was being read top to bottom like a novel. The animal blocked the path leading to his cousin and the others, and the father ran into the arms of his family forever.